Welcome to this episode of BizTakeouts, Bizcommunity's soundbite-sized news to go, made possible by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in partnership with Green Cape, a non-profit organization that drives the widespread adoption of economically viable green economy solutions from South Africa. I'm your host, Angie White, and I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. Tine Fisker-Henriksen is the Innovative Finance Lead for the Bertha Centre for Social Innovation Graduate School of Business and a member of the Green Outcomes Fund Advisory Committee, who will be sharing details of the Green Outcomes Fund, what it means to be a green business, and how green SMMEs apply for funding. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. Let's jump straight in. Can you tell us, Tina, what is the Green Outcomes Fund and how did it all start?
Yes, of course. So it actually came about years ago when we started designing the Green Outcomes Fund. It is brought about in a partnership between the World Bank's Climate Technology Program, Green Cape, the UCT-GSB Bertha Centre for Social Innovation, and WWF South Africa. And the starting point was really to look at if there's a lot of green investors or investors that are interested in investing in green SMMEs, and on the other hand, there's a lot of quite investment-ready green SMMEs, then why are we not necessarily seeing as many deals as we should? And we then went through a design thinking process where we did quite a lot of interviews with the SMMEs, with different stakeholders, with policymakers, with investors, etc., to come up with some of the key bottlenecks. And what we found was really that it was a matter of risk. So for a lot of the investment funds, it really was, yes, we're interested, but the risks are too high. We often don't have the internal green expertise to review a new business model that hasn't been tried and tested. And these deals are sometimes also too early stage. They are potentially also run by an engineer and not necessarily an MBA and stuff. So there's quite a lot of technical assistance and business development also necessary. So if we said, okay, if it's a risk issue, then what do we have in an innovative finance toolbox that we can use? And so the Green Outcomes Fund is really a mix between two big trends in the innovative finance and impact investing space. The blending of capital, so blended finance, which is the use of public and private capital, as well as commercial and philanthropic, and paying for outcomes. So only paying for things once the outcome and impact has been delivered. So what is the Green Outcomes Fund? Well, what we found was that access to finance is one of the key constraints in scaling innovative business models. And as I mentioned, investors, even those with the intention and the mandate to support smaller deal sizes, considered these investments to be too costly and too risky. So the Green Outcomes Fund incentivizes local investment funds to invest in green SMMEs by paying for green outcomes which are achieved by the investees. So that is green outcomes such as green jobs, access to energy connections, wastewater treated, waste being treated, waste tonnage being treated. So by paying for the impact created, we're able to lower the cost and the risks associated with these investments. And we chose to go through the local investment funds and not directly invest in the green SMMEs to build local capacity and really create an investment case that is also there going forward.
Sure, so really a 360 approach.
Yes, it is.
Okay, next up, Tima, what is the definition of a green business and why is it important for businesses to be green?
Yeah, so it gets relatively technical here, but we identify green SMMEs as businesses that limit or prevent harm to the natural environment relative to conventional alternatives. And the term green SMMEs refers to the total governance of the business, which includes the know-how, the procedures, the goods and the services, the equipment, as well as organizational and managerial processes. So what that means as examples are that these green SMMEs pollute less and use all natural resources in a more sustainable manner, that they recycle, more of their waste and products, and that they handle residual waste in a more acceptable manner. So it has to be relatively core business to the business in order to be defined as green. It can't necessarily be an add-on or a greening process, etc. So I think, and that's where the sweet spot for us really happens, in where we can combine resource efficiency, sustainable development, and social impact. And it really is around creating green jobs. It is also to some extent about taking informal jobs and making them formal in the waste sector. There's quite a bit of that, of course. And of course also about making communities more sustainable, etc. So it's a really nice sweet spot between the different developments that we want to see.
Definitely. And then Tina, who are the current Catalytic finance partners?
Yes, so we'd actually, when we started designing the Green Outcomes Fund, we opted for a bit of what we call a life cycle approach, so that we're putting capital in across the life cycle of an SMME. So we wanted catalytic finance partners that represent both the really early stage, so high risk, small ticket sizes, and then further up the value chain and the growth journey of a company once they're more involved and they need larger ticket sizes and they need and potentially investors that are willing to take a little bit less risk. So we've got 4 catalytic finance partners now. They are business partners, which is a known quantity in the SMME finance space and has been around for a very long time. And they can do everything from, say, 500,000 deals to 50 million deals, right? Then we've got Conservation International Ventures Fund, which is a relatively new fund on the side of Conservation International, a conservation NGO, bit like WWF South Africa. And they do very early stage, small ticket sizes down to also 2 million rand and up to about 10. And that's very focused on conservation and communities, etc., on the outskirts of game farms, etc. And then we've got Mergence, which is an impact investment fund, which has also been around for a while with an established track record, which can do bigger ticket sizes in terms of 10 million and upwards. And then we've got Edge Growth, which is an enterprise development fund and also impact investor, and also quite flexible in terms of which ticket sizes and risk they take on. So some of these have relatively concessionary capital and others have quite commercial capital in as their investors. And then the idea is that we, as the Green Outcomes Fund, provide a grant incentive to each of them that they can draw down over 3 years. And then they match that with their capital that they've raised previously.
Nice. It sounds good. And then talking about investment, what are some of the investments that have been made to date?
Yes, also a very good question. And of course, we started implementing the Green Outcomes Fund on the 1st of January 2020, which we thought was very exciting because it was the first new day of a new decade. And as we all know, it's been a different year, right? So a lot of than we'd expected. And it's been both a good and a bad time to start the Green Outcomes Fund, because for one thing, the issues in the green SMME space were a little bit more pronounced than what they were previously. A lot of investment funds have doubled down on their current portfolios. Some of them are, of course, also looking to health. All of it very, very understandable, but making it a little bit more tricky for green SMMEs. So what we've actually done, in addition to the Green Outcomes Fund and its current partners, national, such as the South Africa's National Treasury's Jobs Fund, we've also partnered with the EU to be able to actually provide smaller ticket sizes that are purely grants that we could give to the companies in the pipeline of the catalytic finance partners to also just keep the lights on, to keep paying rent and to keep kind of paying jobs, or paying salaries, etc. So we've done that as well to provide some COVID relief funding. So some of the organizations that we've supported is, for instance, a community-based recycling SMME, which is locally founded here and runs a recycling company with a focus on youth and job creation. So that's relatively kind of pure waste management. Then there's a company, for instance, which is tech-based in terms of energy and water savings, that creates an app to improve energy and water savings in terms of residential geysers. And then there's a compost business, for instance, which is sustainable compost, which is a relatively small local company also that creates compost for local businesses. So it's a relatively wide range of different investments.
Clearly, yeah, everything and anything.
Yes, a little bit.
And then can you tell me, what does the next phase for GOF potentially look like?
Yeah, so that is a bit of an interesting one, of course. And yeah, while this year's gone fast, we were piloting the Green Outcomes Fund over 3 years with an additional 2 years of reporting. And of course, we're almost coming to the end of the first year, which is quite exciting. And there's been lots of lessons learned. I think when we go in towards next year and beginning of next year, what will start happening is additional fundraising. So we can also support a bigger cohort and a bigger pipeline of investment funds. We have started exploring and onboarded potentially new catalytic finance partners. So there's a call that goes out to everybody who wants to partner with the Green Outcomes Fund, of course. And then we are also looking towards geographic expansion. Like, I think there's potential for the Green Outcomes Fund also outside of South Africa potentially, which would be interesting to look at. And then, of course, to just apply what we've learned in terms of the outcomes and seeing if they're right, if we should onboard more green outcomes. Right now we've got 13. If we can use, if we can structure the payment triggers in different ways, etc. What we've seen, which is quite exciting, is we've also seen some of the catalytic finance partners start trying to create different ways of investing as well, where not only is the access to capital for the investees kind of driven to some extent by an outcomes and an impact approach to the Green Outcomes Fund, but also in their direct investments, they are tying the cost of capital to the green impact that is created. Mm-hmm. What does that mean in practice? That means if you, for instance, create an investment contract of, say, this investee is going to create about 20 jobs, and they shoot the lights off on that green impact, and instead they create 50, then they can see that directly on their interest rate if it's a loan, for instance, right? So we're hoping to see a lot more of these different innovations and kind of how we increasingly tie some of the social and green impact that's created to the access and the cost of capital. And thereby we're looking at the incentive structure in the economy, which is pretty cool.
Very exciting. I'm sure next year, or hopefully it will be a better year, a more predictable year, and we can start looking forward to seeing a lot more changes and a lot of that taking place.
Yes.
And then lastly, Tina, how do green SMMEs apply for this funding?
Yes. So preferably through the catalytic finance partners themselves. There is on Green Cape's website quite a thorough guideline in terms of how to go about that and contacts, etc. If one doesn't necessarily make a note of the 4 I just mentioned, so one can go to Green Cape's website and find them again and find contact details, and then either contact directly or, of course, ask Green Cape for contacts. The decision making is made at the individual investment funds.
Okay, great. I'm sure you'll get lots of applications.
We hope so.
Thanks so much for your time, Tina. Really appreciate it. It was really awesome chatting to you. That's a wrap for today's show, with thanks to the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and Green Cape for making it possible. It's BizTakeouts. Take it where you like it, when you like it, how you like it. Until next time.